Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. This webinar is being presented by the Clean Energy States Alliance, and the topic for today's webinar is Plug-in Solar, What States Need to Know. And we have an excellent guest speaker with us today, but before I pass it over to him, I'd like to go over a few webinar logistics. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so your webcam and microphone are disabled. Sorry, this slide is wrong. The chat function is enabled today since today is an exclusive webinar for states and CESA members. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. And we'll be saving about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the presentations for audience questions. Automated captions are available, and the speaker's bio will be made available in the chat. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. We will email you a webinar recording within 48 hours, and it will also be posted to CESA's website at cesa.org/webinars. This webinar is a presentation of the Clean Energy States Alliance, like I said, and CESA is a national nonprofit coalition of public agencies and organizations working together to advance clean energy. CESA members, which are mostly state agencies, include many of the most innovative, successful, and influential public funders of clean energy initiatives in the country. And on this slide, you can see some of all of our CESA members. So today's webinar speaker is Ben Paulos of the Clean Energy States Alliance, who is the author of the report, What States Need to Know About Plug-in Solar. And I will be sending his bio in the chat for you to, if you'd like to read more. And the moderator for today's webinar is Hanna Jones, who is a project director at the Clean Energy States Alliance. She'll be moderating your questions and asking those questions to Ben. And so without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Ben Paulos.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I think I'll share my screen here so we can all see. Okay, good. Is that showing all right, Zareen?
Yep.
All right, good. Yeah, so I'm Ben Paulos. I'm a consultant and staff person for Clean Energy States Alliance. I also work with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and a lot of California community energy providers, CCAs. We did the paper, well, before I get started on the plug-in solar paper, my slides are not advancing. There we go. Oh, I went all the way to the end somehow. Okay, sorry. My apologies here. I wanted to first remind the audience that CESA has a lot of resources that are related to this. A lot of content on low-income solar programs. We have a recently refreshed directory of state low-income clean energy programs on this website, cesa.org. There's a new report about Puerto Rico's first virtual power plant, which you may have heard about from the Super Bowl halftime show, and a lot of other materials. So definitely pay a visit to cesa.org. You can also sign up to the monthly newsletter, the Solar Equity Digest. We have other newsletters as well you can also sign up for, so please do that as well. So in today's presentation, we're going to cover my new paper on plug-in solar. It was written in a FAQ format, 10 questions you need to know about plug-in solar. It's a very new and hot topic. So we're going to talk about, what is it and why is it of interest, what the status is globally and in the United States, and then some of the most important issues around safety, regulatory issues, what the economics look like in different parts of the country, some information on, or some really my observations on market dynamics, like what is the current state of the market, how is it going to evolve over time, and we get to look at my field research because it's a DIY concept, plug-in solar, so I did it myself just to see what it's actually like. And we're going to conclude with talking about some future pathways to bring plug-in solar into the world and some ideas on rules for states. So first of all, what is it? Why is it getting so much attention? Um, we're talking about small systems. In Europe, it's most commonly known as balcony solar because people literally hang it off their balconies, like in this picture. Um, and people live in apartments. It's a way for them to participate in the energy transition to save money on their utility bills. It's really the most basic concept is you have solar panels, you run them through an inverter to convert from DC to AC power, and then you plug it in to your house or your apartment. That's the most simple concept. It doesn't always end up that simple. System sizes are small. In Europe, they're capped most often at 800 watts, which is maybe, two panels, um, or, more smaller panels. Um, they can be even smaller. You can buy kits in the US now that are 800 watts. The concept is that it's so easy, you can install it yourself. You simply point it at the sun and you plug it in, snap the wires together. The concept further is you don't need permits or don't need many permits, and you don't need interconnection permission from utility. It's really solar as a consumer appliance. The idea is you will go to the hardware store and bring it home and plug it in. So why is this of interest? There's a lot of interest in reducing the cost of solar. Solar prices in the United States have remained kind of stubbornly high compared to other markets around the world. Soft costs are a big problem, especially customer acquisition, all the marketing, the education of customers, getting permits, all that stuff really drives up prices. It's a way to increase participation in the clean energy economy. It's a way, of course, to cut household bills. Affordability is the number one issue in the energy world now, well, after data centers, but it's a very important issue. And of course, it generates clean power, which cuts global warming pollution, so that's good. So the status globally, it's really a European idea, a European innovation. Germany is maybe the most gets the most attention. They have at least 1 million systems that are registered with utilities, and maybe about 4 million total, because not everyone bothers to register it. It's just something you bought at a store and you plugged it in. In fact, you can buy it at IKEA, and here are a few kits. Prices are very low in the 75 cents a watt range. They can come with batteries or without. Um, there are a lot of different marketers, not just IKEA, but it really has become a mainstream concept. And it's true in a lot of other countries in Europe as well. In the US, we're really just starting. The legal status is not entirely clear about permitting and interconnection. There is the very active DIY solar community out there. I joined one on Facebook just to learn about it. There are tons of materials on YouTube about how you can do it yourself. And now that plug-in solar has sort of scaled in Europe, it caught the attention of advocates in the US and marketers. So there's growing interest in the US and a growing movement, which I'll talk about in a minute. One expression of that movement is lots of legislation. Utah was famously the first to pass a bill legalizing and setting policy for plug-in solar. But now this year, it's only beginning of February, and we have 25 bills, 25 states that have bills introduced. Just this week, Virginia and Vermont passed legislation through one of their houses. It was unanimous in Vermont, and there was one no vote in Virginia. So it has a lot of appeal as a way to deal with affordability. One of the advocacy groups is Bright Saver. They have a running tally of legislation with links to all the bills. The bills tend to be pretty short and to the point, and we can talk about the policy issues in a minute. There's a few really pressing issues. The first question that comes up always is safety. Is it safe to plug a solar panel into an outlet in your house. Solar panels are typically on the roof. They have a dedicated circuit. They may have a string inverter or microinverters, and they're plugged into a dedicated circuit in your circuit panel by a professional qualified electrician. Plug-in solar is not like that. You literally have an outlet that you plug your solar panels into. Is that safe? So the main safety regulator, not regulator, safety body, testing body in the United States is Underwriter Labs, UL. They have just opened last month a testing and certification service for the system as a whole, not just the individual components. The individual components, the solar panels, the inverters, are already UL certified, and they have been for a long time. The difference is the package and how it's installed. So UL, I learned, has different bodies. The body that is open to testing and certification is not the same as the standard setting body. Instead, they created what's called an outline of investigation, did it very quickly, did their own analysis, took some input, and came out in a matter of months with this document. An official standard takes much longer, a few years perhaps, as official stakeholder engagement. But the UL thought they should move quickly because they wanted to create a pathway to market. They saw that the states were moving quickly, and they thought they needed to respond to that. So they set up this lighter weight process, outline of investigation. And the analysis really touches on three issues: touch safety, circuit overload, and ground fault protection. The first question that always comes up is, will this shock someone if the power goes out? You know, and there's a line worker working on the line. That's already covered in inverter standards from UL. They're already built to do what's called anti-islanding. They shut down the system if the power goes out. So that's not really an issue. But touch safety, circuit overload, and ground fault protection, I'm going to walk through those. Touch safety is literally you can touch electrical things and get a shock. The picture down on the bottom right, you can see this plug is only halfway plugged into a power strip, but the metal is exposed. So if you touch that metal, you would get a shock. US plugs, the standard three-prong plug, are pretty bad for touch safety. They really stick out quite a bit, even when they're energized. Using them for plugging it in to be the output of a solar panel is also a problem because they can be live, or you can create a circuit by touching it and get a shock, even if it's not plugged into an outlet. If your solar panels are sitting out in the sun and you take that socket and you stick it in your mouth, I would not recommend that. The gray box on the right, that's a standard European plug known as a Schuko plug. It's actually much better at touch safety because the whole plug sort of fits into that indent there and you can't touch it when it's energized. Solar cables, like the picture on the bottom, those are standard cables for solar panels. They're also very good for touch safety. All the metal is deep inside the plastic, so you can't really touch them. To deal with touch safety, UL would like to have a special plug that has, no risk of touch safety. They really hate this US three-prong plug. So that's a big part of their direction, their guidance. I hesitate to call it a standard, but it's effectively a standard. The second issue is circuit overload. A home circuit may be, 15, 20, 30 amps. And when you put too many amps on it, it would overload the wires, and to protect against overloading and overheating of the wires, the circuit breaks and shuts off the circuit. That's a circuit breaker. Those are the things in your panel on the side of your house. There is UL's job is to assume the worst. So I will give them that. These diagrams show a case, the top diagram shows a case where, let's say you have a 20 amp circuit and you decide to plug in two hair dryers at the same time. Each of them draws 14 amps. So you're drawing 28 amps on a 20 amp circuit. That's the red arrow here. That line would overheat and potentially cause a fire. And to prevent it, the circuit flips and shuts off the power. In the top case, if you plug in your solar generator and your battery upstream from the two hair dryers, that can do what's called breaker masking, because in this case, the solar panels and the battery are putting out 5 amps each, so that 10 amps makes the breaker think that there's only 18 amps on the circuit, when in fact there's 28 amps on it at the end of the circuit. So that part where the red arrow is can get hot, and that's where you could start a fire in your house, and the circuit breaker would not realize that. To me, I mean, this seems like a kind of a rare circumstance, but that is UL's job, is to assume the worst. So in the bottom case, the two hair dryers are upstream on the circuit, closer to the circuit breaker. And in this case, the solar panel and the battery at that time are putting out 10 amps. And that actually helps power those hair dryers. So the effective load on the circuit is only 18 amps, and the circuit breaker thinks it's fine, which it is fine, because you see it's all green arrows and there is no overload along the line. So this is how circuit overload can happen. This is what's called breaker masking. There are technical fixes, or you can be careful about where you site on the circuit. UL would like a technical fix. This is a diagram from their outline of investigation, and they think that you should plug in your solar panel closest to the panel, to the circuit breaker, I mean, and you should have a special plug. They call it a proprietary plug-in photovoltaic receptacle. That is a plug that is unique, not like an American three-prong or anything else, because they want to have an electrician to determine where in the house this circuit should be. The receptacle should have a bidirectional ground fault circuit interrupter, which actually I'll get to in a minute, and should have a circuit breaker on the branch, not just in the panel. That product doesn't actually exist at this point, to have a unique plug with a built-in bidirectional GFCI and a circuit breaker on the circuit. It could be built. It does not exist now. It would likely require an electrician to install it. It's not actually that hard to replace a receptacle, but this may be a unique receptacle, so it would require, fresh installation, not just changing the plugs inside a circuit box or plug box. So the location of the circuit is very important. Imagine, in this graphic, you see the circuits running through your house. And imagine you plug in your solar panel somewhere. In this particular diagram, it's plugged in, looks like, kind of at the end of a line or on a dedicated circuit. So it's probably a good location. But you can imagine someone plugging it in a more convenient spot that's not at the end of a line and will have more interaction with other things on that circuit. If you put it in the right place, that alone can prevent overloads if it's on its own circuit, for example, or downstream, like in that example I gave. But a lot of homeowners aren't really going to know the topography of the circuits in their home. So you either need to educate them to figure out how their circuits are laid out and how they're functioning, or you need an electrician to let them know how to do it and to tell them where to put their solar panels. UL would definitely like the electrician to come out to the house and do that for you. But that tends to undermine the DIY value of plug-in solar. So that's a real point of contention, I think, that we're going to see. The last safety issue is on ground fault protection. This you probably have one of these in your home, especially in the bathroom. It's a receptacle that has a little trigger built right into it, kind of a circuit breaker that prevents against ground faults. Like if you drop your hairdryer into the sink full of water, this will cut off power instantly so you don't shock yourself. Um, they are designed to be one way from load to the circuit, or from the house to your appliance, essentially. Um, some of them, it turns out, work in both directions, but they aren't really designed to do that, and they're not really certified for that. So UL wants to make sure that they are certified and tested to be bidirectional, in case you get a fault coming from your solar panel into the house. This function could also be built into an inverter, so it doesn't have to be a new receptacle. But as I mentioned, they would like this special receptacle dedicated to plug-in solar. That's really their goal. Possibly marketers will respond to that, and it will be easier for an electrician to install it. Or it's possible, because this is a DIY adventure, that people will simply ignore all of this and plug it in wherever they want, which is one of the conclusions I have coming up at the end. So regulatory issues really fall into two buckets. There's local permitting and there is grid interconnection. For local permitting, the concept is that this is an appliance like a refrigerator, which is not usually covered by building codes. Building codes usually reflect the National Electrical Code, the NEC. You don't typically need a permit from your city to put in a refrigerator in your home. Is this going to be different? Will local authorities want to issue permits for it anyway? And even if they do, what will the compliance be like? I, for example, have learned that in Oakland, California, near where I live, the compliance rate for replacing a water heater is about 10%. So 9 out of 10 water heaters are replaced without a permit, even though the city wants you to get a permit. With DIY solar, will people be eager to get permits from their local authority? Will the local authority be able to do anything about it if they don't get a permit? Anyway, there's some real world issues about local permitting. Regarding grid interconnection, the key regulatory issue is whether the system is exporting power to the grid. If it's strictly for self-consumption, if you're putting power into a battery and using the battery entirely behind the meter, if you have a sort of mini microgrid in your home and your plug-in solar system is attached to your hot tub or your pool pump, and it's not really connected to the grid at all, then there really is no grid interconnection issue. But if you are exporting power to the grid, the utilities are going to want to know about that. The way Utah deals with it is that they exempt small systems from net metering. That's really the key operative point of their legislation. What that means is you are not required to register with the utility. You are not required to have, a bidirectional meter, although they already have those. It also means you, the homeowner, don't get paid, you don't get compensated for any exports to the system, to the grid. With net metering, we all know you get credit for an export, and the credit becomes a value on your bill at the end of the month. Utah says these small plug-in systems are not required to get net metering. Therefore, any exports are essentially given away free to the utility or to your neighbors. The grid connection issue in Europe is that they simply limit the size. Most countries have 800-watt limits for 800-watt AC output limits. And they request registration. They don't always get it because they would like to know how many panels are out there. So economics, and for all of these questions, there's more content, of course, in the paper, which is on the website at CESA.org. For economics, the big value of this, as I mentioned, is to reduce the cost of solar and to create savings for customers. It reduces costs through reducing sales and marketing and customer acquisition, assuming that it becomes a mainstream commercial product and it doesn't need as much advertising. There's more word of mouth, et cetera. It reduces local permitting and inspection costs. If there's no permit and there's no inspection, then there's no cost. It can reduce interconnection if there is no interconnection requirement. And it can reduce labor cost or at least transfer labor from paid labor to unpaid labor if you're doing it yourself. There are some penalties compared to conventional solar. They're pretty likely not going to perform as well as rooftop solar installed by professionals. They're likely to be put in suboptimal places. If they're on a balcony, they may be, vertical, not getting optimal sunlight. There may be shading issues. Um, there are risk issues, as I talked about, not only safety issues, but also consumer protection risks. Are you buying, certified, UL certified equipment, or are you buying cheap stuff off of eBay? There's a policy impact. Policy is a big driver of the economics. Like I mentioned about treatment of exports, if you exempt systems from that metering, that means there's less value for exports. Solar, of course, only generates in the daytime. If you're not using much power in the daytime because you're not home, you may be generating really quite a bit of that power, exporting quite a bit of the power. So it may have even less value to you. Of course, installing a battery can optimize self-consumption, although batteries add cost, but they also add additional values. So if the policy does require coverage by net metering or net billing, that requires utility involvement, which can require a lot more process and expense. Additionally, if policies require electricians or permits, then the value proposition of plug-in solar erodes and it becomes, potentially as expensive as rooftop solar, but with less performance in sort of a worst case. This is a very simple payback analysis. This map is really just a map of average retail electricity rates. And I created a very simple payback calculator you can find in the report, and it's online as well, just a really simple Google spreadsheet where you can put in some values about performance and costs and retail rates. But you can imagine that the generation of a small plug-in system might be worth $100 to $500 a year of a system that's maybe 800 watts or 1200 watts. The value, of course, is a function of retail rates, the installation cost, the performance of the system. If you imagine, this map shows essentially high value states and low value states based on retail electricity prices. If it costs you very little to install, and you're in a high value state like California or Massachusetts, if you get the price down to that IKEA Germany price of maybe 75 cents a watt, you can have extremely short paybacks, year-and-a-half paybacks, if you really get the price down. If you have a high cost system, which is where we're at now, like, $2 a watt perhaps, then the payback rises to maybe 5 years in the high value states. In the low value states, I see a range more like 5 to 16 years. Low value, like, North Dakota, Louisiana. So rising electricity rates will drive these values down, make the payback shorter. I think a maturing of the market will make the cost of systems lower, and also shorten the paybacks. The current market in the US has a number of shortcomings. One is that most inverters are built to be 240 volt output. Because they're designed for rooftop systems. Europe runs 240 volt in households instead of 120 volts like we do here. So there are very, very few inverters available on the market. This is a picture of one. I really only know of two, although it's not difficult for companies to make a 120 volt market product. So I think we'll see it as soon as there's a market for them. There's a lack of local retailers, and this is a logistical issue because shipping just 2 or 3 or 4 panels through the mail is very, very expensive. Panels are getting larger, they're rigid, they're glass, they're expensive to ship. They tend to be shipped by the pallet, not by the individual panel. And the shipping costs are so high that it kind of ruins the economics of the whole thing. Some marketers are getting around it by shipping foldable or flexible panels through the mail, which drives down the price. These are panels that you can get for sailboats, for example, marine grade panels. There is a growing market for portable batteries. You probably have seen ads like this one on the bottom right. My social media is full of this now that I've been working on this topic. Batteries have built-in inverters, so you don't really need a separate inverter. You can plug your solar panels right into these portable batteries, and they will put out AC power for you that you can plug into your house. You can also just plug things into them, like your refrigerator. You can take it camping with you and have power when you're camping. A lot of this technology is honestly coming out of the RV industry, the recreational vehicle industry. RVs are, DC powered vehicles. And there's a lot of technology that has been developed for them. And so it's really evolving into plug-in solar. Oops. What I think is going to happen going forward is, because this is a consumer product, manufacturers will emerge to create DIY kits. The kits will be much cheaper than current prices. They will have distribution channels, so there will be retailers. This is another post from my social media feed. Is a crowdsourcing effort from somebody called Gigawatt Inc. And they computer generated solar Home Depot and a solar Walmart to put in my feeds. And this is really kind of the end game for this concept, is that right now it's kind of a DIY back channel thing with shipping and logistical problems. Home Depot, this is exactly what they do. So once it becomes a credible market, you will find it on your shelf at your local Home Depot. Consumer education, I think, is going to be critical. People will need to know how to do this. It's really, as I mentioned previously in the section on safety, knowing where to plug it in is going to be really important, and how not to shock yourself. And UL standards are going to be great. They're going to derive manufacturer behavior for sure, but I kind of doubt they're going to drive consumer behavior. I'm not sure how many consumers know much about UL and how UL would reach them. So someone needs to reach them, and that's going to be one of my recommendations. The market penetration, I think the order is going to be expanding from current solar customers. I actually don't know the rules in all the states, but in California, where I live, you can add up to a kilowatt of your system and stay on net metering. We have now net billing, and net metering has ended for new customers. But if you are a legacy net metering customer, and there are about 2 million of them in California, you can add a kilowatt to your system without any further permission from the utility. So that's immediately a market of 2 million customers who can do real plug-in solar. The next customers in line are going to be users with large bills. If you live in the Central Valley in California, you probably have a swimming pool and 2 air conditioners. You have very, very large electric bills. You're going to be very interested in solar. And then lastly, apartment dwellers who are also suffering from high electric bills and really can't do anything about it except save energy, which they should, of course. Now they can hang a solar panel off their balcony and cut their bills. So I think those 3 customer classes are going to be very interested in this, and we're going to see that emerge. So as I mentioned, I did some field research, which I'll tell you about, and then we'll do the conclusions, and then we'll have some Q&A. So I live on a single family home in Berkeley. My friend has solar and was interested in expanding his kit. I told him about Bright Saver, which is the main advocacy group. They're based here in the Bay Area. They do advocacy, but they also sell these kits, NEM expansion kits. So he was interested, and we spent a weekend putting one up on the roof of his house. Um, we learned some things along the way about ballast and the importance, how very strong wind can be, surprisingly strong. And it kind of blew the system around. We had to add ballast and tie the system down to his roof a little better. Then I wanted to add to my own very small system. I've got a 13-year-old small system, 8 panels, and I wanted to add to it because I've been going more electric over the years. But I wanted to, instead of just buying the kit, I wanted to see if I could get down to that IKEA price, that European price. There's a fairly robust market for used solar panels in the Bay Area. We have lots and lots of solar, and some of those panels have come off of roofs for various reasons or have been left over from ground mount utility scale projects. So Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, home refurbishing stores will have solar panels. So I bought 4 panels for $50 a piece. I bought the one and only inverter on the market. I managed to get the price down to about 75 cents a watt, which is in the ballpark for the European price. And I put it on the roof of my garage here, and I plugged it into an outlet in my garage, which I know was at the end of my circuit, thanks to the research that I read. My lessons learned, really, this is kind of the quintessential Saturday dad project. Get yourself a 6-pack of beer and plug in your solar panels kind of thing. But I learned that buying a kit is has a lot of value. I had to learn all about amps and volts to make sure my solar panels were wired up correctly. I now know the difference between parallel and series wiring. So some knowledge is definitely required. And as I mentioned, the market's really got to sort of mature to have more inverters available, lower cost inverters, more retail options, better shipping options. So I really did feel kind of like a pioneer, not so much in the plugging it in part, but in the getting the equipment together part. So there's definitely a value in creating the kits. So to wrap it up, there are, I think, 3 pathways to realization for this market. First, you have to set policies and deal with the rules around net metering and interconnection and permitting. You have to decide whether subsidies are necessary or maybe necessary for certain sub audiences like low-income households or disadvantaged communities. The next step is to define regulation, like safety issues, certification and testing for UL. Should it be permitted or not? And then market making. The market's got to come together. And because so much of it is, a consumer product, some of that may just happen all by itself. But, as state officials, you may be interested in making sure there's consumer protection and education. So the ideas for states, and this is in the report, toward the end of the report, with safety issues, do you want to participate in the UL standard making process? So far, I don't believe any states have been talking to UL about plug-in solar safety issues. Should it be part of building codes or not? For education and training, and this is actually, I think, one of the most important areas, because it's a consumer product with DIY propensities, I think having materials on how to do safe installations is very important. The real venue for that, frankly, is YouTube. What I call YouTube University is full of guidance on how to do DIY solar. So if you want to meet people where they are, that's where they are. There are consumer protection issues. Do you want to register sellers? Do you want to require disclosure of certain issues like expected output or voltage, things like that? It may depend on how the retail market shakes out. There are some policy opportunities and also some potential barriers to deal with. Um, I think it's a great way to integrate with low-income energy programs. A lot of low-income households do not own their homes. They're not in a position to put solar on the roof. They're not maybe credit worthy to get a PPA or loan for a $10,000, $20,000 system, but they may be able to save the money to get 75 cents a watt system, a $2,000 or $1,000 system that they can hang on their balcony and save $100 a year. So it's a good opportunity there to integrate with your low-income solar programs because it's a good way to reach people in apartments. HOA rules may be an issue. If you have HOAs restricting how things are installed, you may have to consider, maybe just have safety requirements, but not aesthetic requirements. Do you want to subsidize it? Then in the market making process, should state offices be doing promotional campaigns or should you leave it all up to marketers? Do you want to facilitate group procurement to drive down costs and educate installers by bringing them together? Landlords and affordable housing providers may be important audiences, maybe important barriers if they don't want balcony, solar panels hanging off all the balconies. So, engaging with landlords and affordable housing owners is probably a good idea to open up this opportunity for apartment dwellers. All right, so that's my talk, and I see there's a number of chats coming in. I think Hannah is gonna she's been monitoring the Q&A, and we're gonna turn it over to Hannah to see what kind of questions have come in. And once again, this report is available on our website, CESA.org.
All right. Thank you, Ben. And thanks for all of your in the field work on this topic and all the research you did. We are going to kick off our Q&A portion of the session. And thanks for everybody for submitting their questions to the chat. And feel free to keep adding those and we'll go through them as they come in. So, Ben, first question is, would the special circuit then require any heavy up to the panel box that's dedicated solely for that circuit? So maybe any changes that would need to be done to the main service panel.
No, not to the main service panel, as long as you have, well, frankly, the idea is that you're plugging into an existing circuit. So you don't even need to expand your panel. It's kind of an issue with home electrification that a lot of panels tend to be small, and especially in older homes. I have a 100-amp panel that's about this big. I literally can't put anything else into the panel because there's no space. But the idea with plug-in solar is that you're using an existing circuit. So you shouldn't need to rewire things. That's the theory. But it kind of depends on your panel and your home circuits.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay, next question. Are there any worries about how these systems are installed for safety, especially since it's usually DIY? And like you mentioned earlier, things like high wind blowing the solar off a balcony or a roof.
Yeah, there is the physical safety issue of dropping a solar panel on somebody's head. Don't want that to happen. And well, then the electrical safety issues, I feel like I covered those pretty well about circuit overload and touch safety and ground fault management. So
when you were exploring the ballast system and the weight, did you go to YouTube University for some tips there, or how did you guys decide how much weight?
No, I just used logic. I had, a bunch of cement blocks and I thought, well, these are pretty heavy. They were not heavy enough, as I learned.
Wonderful. So next question is on bidirectional meters, effectively resulting in net metering if there is not a surplus generated within the building or the billing period, sorry.
Yeah. So, bidirectional meter, I mean, I know they're not everywhere, but they're pretty common these days. And I assume utilities are track and are able to track flows in both directions with these meters, AMI metering technology. I suppose there are cases where the utilities are not able to track it and they would need to learn how to do that, set up the software. So once you're tracking flows in both directions, the question is, how do you deal with that economically? Do you give a value to it or not? Do you have net metering or do you not? So if a utility has net metering, the question is, should these systems be exempted from it or not? And I don't know. I mean, they're part of the theory is that these are small systems. They're actually not producing a lot of power, so it's not really worth the administrative hassle of setting up net metering for an 800-watt system. So I think that's kind of the logic. Interestingly, Brightsaver, as I mentioned, they're one of their interventions with NEC and UL is that they are encouraging total exemption for very small systems, like systems less than 400 watts, because they basically have determined that the risk of circuit overload, et cetera, for a 400-watt system is negligible. So they may be thinking of like absolute exemption for 400-watt or less systems, and different rules for systems from like 400 to 1200 watts that have more safety requirements or more administrative requirements.
Do you happen to know how long this UL certification process will go for plug-in solar?
Yeah. So interestingly, UL Solutions is the arm of UL that created the current testing and certification protocol. And they created those standards through what I mentioned is called an outline of investigation. And there's a link, it's UL 3700 is the code number. There's a link to it in the report. And you can look at it online. You have to give them lots of money to actually buy the document. I learned that's how they make their living. But you can read through it. They're because it is not an official UL standard, it is not subject to the UL. There's a different body called UL Standards and Engagement that sets official standards. So it's easier for them to change, and they are open to input. I actually gave them a few comments from my reading of it. It has a few things that I thought are kind of like placeholders. They would like a cap of 1 kilowatt hours for batteries, for example. I don't really understand that. I don't get the safety issue or logic, but it's in there. So if you really want to engage, you can certainly read through their outline and give them comments. And they can make those changes more quickly because they don't have to go back through a whole stakeholder process. So the official standards process is from the ULSE standards and engagement. They are thinking about running it through that. That will take a long time, a couple of years. There's an additional process from the National Electrical Code, the NEC. They take revisions every 3 years, and that is currently open for comment. And there's discussion about putting something in the NEC about plug-in solar. NEC does not cover appliances at all. It really covers building systems. So there may be some discussion in there about bidirectional power flows on building circuits, because that would be something covered by NEC.
All right, thank you. Folks are curious if rooftop solar companies are actively opposing plug-in solar. Have you seen any of those efforts?
I've not seen that at all, no. I think a bigger question is utility positions on it. I mean, frankly, rooftop solar companies, if this becomes a thing, they'll get into the plug-in business too.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own, logistics management operations. They have warehouses full of solar panels. They can deliver one to your house for you. I'm sure they'll get into it. So I can't imagine they'll oppose it. Utilities, I think, are much more likely to oppose. Frankly, my own political take on it is that the bill passed so quickly in Utah because they haven't sort of developed their battle lines in Utah. We have deep and muddied trenches in California, and people will run to the trenches, and plug-in solar will have the same battle that rooftop solar has. We have so much solar penetration here. We have 2.5 million systems. Electricity rates are shooting up. Even without net metering, it's still worth it to go solar. I was just talking to one of my CCA clients up in the Sierras, not a very liberal or affluent part of the state. 25% of their customers have solar because they're doing it to save money. So as rates keep rising, the demand for solar is just going to keep going up, and plug-in solar is a way to make it even easier to go solar. So I think the market response is going to be extremely high, especially in states with high rates.
Yeah, and it seemed like the work that Utah did incorporate, the utilities at the start of the
Yes.
conversations as well. And
Very
so
much.
maybe there is a place for um, collaboration and having
Yeah.
those discussions early.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I think the utilities saw the administrative value of, exempting
yeah.
them from NEM. It doesn't cost the utility anything because, and frankly, they get a little bit of free electricity. But mostly there's like no administrative hassle. The legislation also exempted them from liability, which makes total sense. It's not their
Yep.
system, so.
All right. Next question is on safety. So let's see. What is the danger that the systems won't be safe enough or that we can't trust consumers to use plug-in safely and that
Mhm.
accidents, fires will mount and set back the entire solar industry?
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a worst case scenario. Um, the plug-in advocates do like to say that it has never happened in Germany. They
Okay.
have 4 million homes and there hasn't been a fire yet. Um, though you should never overestimate the intelligence of the American homeowner. I can imagine somebody doing it wrong. We also have 120-volt outlets or circuits in our homes, which are a lot smaller capacity than in Europe. They have 240-volt circuits. So they're less likely to overload circuits because they have 240-volt circuits. So, I think, as I mentioned, I think UL certification is aspirational. Um, UL certifies backup generators, gasoline generators, which kill 80 people a year or so
Wow.
from carbon monoxide poisoning and electrocution and fires. But they're all UL certified, right?
Hmm.
So UL certification can only take you so far. I think education is absolutely the most important thing. Um, I can imagine having electrician light services where an electrician will come to your house and put in one circuit and tell you where to plug in your solar panels. And that'll be a lot cheaper than, full solar installation. But I think the states for states that are moving in this direction very quickly, and potentially all of your states are, I think having the state energy offices develop educational materials aggressively and promote them aggressively, working with marketers to
Yeah.
promote them, is really going to be the most important safety measure, much more important than UL standards.
I agree. Okay, I think you'll like this question. It seems likely that municipalities may want to require an electrical permit for liability issues given the circuit overloading concern, not to
Mhm.
mention wind loads and placement that could affect neighbors. If you were head of a permit office, how would you approach this to both avoid creating a barrier to the benefits, but also to protect consumers and neighbors? And hats off to this question. Very well written.
Mhm. Yeah, yep. Um, yeah, permitting. Like I mentioned, the compliance rate in Oakland for water heaters very, very, very low. I think permitting offices have they run the risk of making their process too difficult and too expensive and too punitive, and it turns people off from even wanting to deal with them. I have to hear that from contractors all the time. Contractors do it because they have to do it, because they would get in trouble and lose their license if they didn't do it. But they'll tell you that it's up to the homeowner to decide whether they get the permit or not. I had a friend who put in a water heater, and the installer said, I can get you, the water heater will be $900. And if you want me to get a permit, it'll be another $900 on top of that. So the homeowner decided not to. So I think permitting offices really need to work on user friendliness. They need to work on very clear standards and communication, and they need to work on educating contractors. Because the harder you make things, the less control you have over your outcome,
Fair enough. All right. Next up is if you talked about what the estimate is for how much load one of these off-the-shelf kits would cover.
Oh yeah, and so that's in our little calculator. I should put that little calculator in our chat box. Um, it it really depends entirely on where is that link? I gotta find the link. Sorry. Like I said, in the range, it can range a lot from $100 to $500 a year. I mean, retail electricity rates, residential rates range from 10 cents to 60 cents in America. The California, the PG&E, which is my local utility, tier 2, we have an inclining block structure. On peak TOU rate in the evenings is 61 cents now, which is
Wow.
very, very high. And if you're generating your power then, and if you're pushing yourself down from tier 2 down to tier 1, that's really super valuable generation, which is why so many homes in California have solar, especially high consuming homes. So yeah, and there's a comment they can go below 10 cents. Yeah, so there's an enormous range. And the little calculator that's in the report or linked to in the report can give you a very simple payback estimate.
All right, we have a question on addressing breaker masking in Europe and other markets. Do they have any electrician requirements, successful education for consumers that you've come across?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I realized I don't know the answer to that. We are, I think Vero has scheduled us to talk to some Europeans, some European regulators, so we're going to get more insight, more details about things like that. I do know that they do have an 800-watt AC cap, which on a 240 volt outlet is, it certainly reduces the risk. My fear about, a DIY homeowner in America is if 1 kilowatt's good, why not 3 or 4? And you run them all through some little wire and you fry your house. So
they love it so much that
right. The more you put in, the more you save. So just keep plugging in,
All right, I think we have time for one more question. And if you do have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to either Ben and I, and we'll be happy to talk to you all about plug-in solar. But let's see here. So we have asking you to speculate on when markets may be mature enough to entice larger scale adoption in the US.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, like I said, I feel like the end play is big box retailers. Before that, I can see different kinds of evolution happening. Current solar installers who order their panels by the pallet load are in a good position to become distributors, local distributors. Solar retailers kind of went away a long time ago. If anybody's old enough to remember Real Goods, for example, went out of business a long time ago. So there's essentially no solar retail that I know of. And rooftop installers are the closest thing to that because they have a distribution center, I'm on the board of Solar United Neighbors advocacy group. They started by doing group procurement back in the day, getting 50 households together to all go
Right.
solar together. And I thought, well, that's ideal for plug-in solar. You buy a couple pallets of panels and inverters and you invite everyone over and you teach them how to plug it in and where to plug it in their house. So, those kinds of things are nice. I can see those happening. Ultimately, I think Walmart and Home Depot will crush those once they get interested. But I can see different kinds of evolution happening before that sort of end game.
Yeah, I would love to attend one of those plug-in solar how-tos. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Any last comments before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just really my last comment is that uh, there's so many barriers being thrown up to clean energy, political barriers, siting barriers, all kinds, tariffs and trade issues. Um, the plug-in solar, I feel like, is a response to that. Like the imagine there's a sieve that's trying to prevent water from flowing through, and solar is the water. It's still going to get through because you only need really small holes for water to flow through. Um, and this is kind of making solar smaller and smaller, so it's going to just flow through any holes. Um, so it's small. These are 800-watt systems. It's not much to get excited about. But they can really add up. 4 million systems in Germany, that's, 3 gigawatts of solar by people who wouldn't have done it otherwise. It's not, I mean, even by German standards, 3 gigawatts is not a lot. It's only like 3% of their solar installed. But it's a way to participate in the clean energy transition. It's a way to cut energy bills. Affordability is very hot. So I think it's going to be a very attractive idea in a lot of places.
All right. Well, that is a fabulous way to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and big thanks to you, Ben, for all your hard work.
Yeah,
Bye,
thanks.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.